Okay, so today I wanted to talk about sculpting the torso and back in ZBrush. All right, ZBrush is has been doing good to us, and I do appreciate the work you guys have been putting in, like I said. So let us dive right in. All right. So the objective for this lesson is to understand the key anatomical landmarks of the torso and back. Learn how to block out and refine the torso and back inside of ZBrush, identify common mistakes, and how to avoid them. And the fourth is to develop a workflow for sculpting realistic and anatomically accurate torsos, which is another part of it is you want it to be anatomically correct, which is when I talk about that, I'm talking about the proportions of the muscles to each other, the proportions from them to the bone, using those landmarks. And the only way you're going to get better at those things is if you keep practicing them. All right? So keep practicing your proportions, how they fit together. Let's talk about the landmarks of the torso and the back. All right? So when we're talking about the front of uh, the physique, right? The main muscles and landmarks you guys should kind of, let yourself know is where these. I would start with these kind of blue purplish muscles, and then go from there. So we're gonna start at the top, which is the the sternocleidomastoid. It's a very long name to pronounce, but it's that muscle that attaches from like the back of your ear to your clavicle. All right, so it goes all the way down, like right there, and it attaches right in there and right here. Number three, right? That's your clavicle. All right, that's your clavicle. That's a bone. That's not a muscle. That's a bone, right? And that goes all the way here, right, to your shoulder blade, which is right around here, right? And last week we talked about how the pectoral muscle, right, how the bicep goes right under the pectoral, and how the pectoral goes right into, right, our delts, right, our deltoid area right here. So it looks kind of like a seamless transition, but you got to see how the muscle fibers themselves are pulling into that area. And these are the kind of things that give your sculpts more realism, is how you're transitioning those, right? It goes from this giant shape and it tapers right into our delts, right? And then the delts do the same. They go all the way out and they taper right into our brachialis right there, right? So it's a series of you're grabbing, you're tucking stuff under, you're putting, you're layering muscle in a way that it makes sense. All right. So if we go to number 4, then our number 5 is our deltoids, right? Number 6 is our pectoralis, the pecs, right? Number 7 is the serratus anterior, right here, which is those things that when you see on really ripped guys, it's the thing, the wings or the little fins, right? They make the sculpt or the body look very, very defined, right? So guys who are really, really vascular, guys who are really, really fit, who have very low body fat, you can see it very well on those guys. All right. And then there's the triceps back here. You can't really see it, but what I'm trying to focus on for this is how our deltoids go into the pecs, how our biceps go into it, right? We already talked about all this stuff last week, so I'm not going to go over that again, but we want to also focus on the abs right here, right? The rectus abdominis. And a lot of times people say, oh, you can get but really you can have like a 10 pack from, if people get really vascular enough and people get really, when they get really roided out, you know what I'm saying? Like those guys, you can really have 10 packs, and these guys look like the Greeks, the Greek sculptures that you have back in the day and stuff like that. And people's people really do push their physique to the limit, you know, and what the human body can do is pretty ridiculous, you know. We've got the rib cage, right? That's right under our sternum, right? The center of our rib cage, right? We've already talked about the clavicle, the abdominis, muscles, right? Right. This is the navel, right in the center, and these are the biggest kind of muscles that you're going to have to kind of deal with when you're talking about the body, right? You've got your obliques, you've got your little fins, you've got your pecs, you've got to worry about the sternocleidomastoid connecting to the clavicle, how the deltoids, right? Like, and that's really it for the front of it, right? And what you want to remember is how the rib cage falls, right? You can see the edge of the rib cage and how it connects to our obliques, right? And how our obliques are kind of laid on top of them, and in between, you know, even there's the center of them, there's like a peak and a valley for your abs, and there's just the flow and the transition of the muscle, right? And if you guys try to pay attention to how the muscle fibers are flowing, which is what I always talk about, it's like another part of it is how you're showing this muscle fiber, because if you're showing them in the right direction, it's gonna lead the eye like, okay, I know what this muscle's supposed to be. It looks like he's trying to define this muscle, or, you know. So you want to be kind of specific in how you're drawing the fibers, right? How you're pushing those, in what direction they're going, and where you're placing them, right? On the body. And depending on the length of the torso, the length of the spine, the rib cage, its position, right? It can fall anywhere. And a lot of times what you'll see students do is they'll draw these as like cubes or rounded squares or something, when in reality they kind of they're amorphous, and they have their own kind of, you know, shape depending on how that the human body is, and, you know, wider at the top, slimmer at the bottom, and they have a very interesting shape to them as well. So we're talking about the landmarks of the body, right? We're talking about the sternum and the costal margin are the key bone landmarks on the torso. The upper border of the pelvis follows the iliac crest, right? This is the iliac crest, right? Its frontmost corner is called the anterior superior iliac spine, the red dots, and it serves as an important bony landmark for the pelvis and the lower limbs, right? So they're talking about our pelvis and how it connects. So like you see where the top of the pelvis is, you don't realize that when it comes to where it is in connection to our abdominals, right? That's where it is, right there, right? So you have to keep these little landmarks in mind. So when you're thinking about it, you should think, oh, the hips isn't so far down, it's actually far up, right? And then we've got the muscles that lay right on top of it, right? And when you look at how the pectoralis, right, attaches, right, it attaches to our bone, and then we've got our delts that cover that, right? So that helps us move, right, rotate, and that's connected, and it gives you, you know, you can even do it yourself and feel what part of your muscle is activated when you pull up, pull down with your arm, push forward, backwards, and you can see how your pectoralis is affected by the motion of your arm. So these are really cool exercises to do for yourself too. It's just to see, okay, can I draw it from any angle? Can I, you know, so if you look at the side, you can see how it kind of swoops down and it attaches right there. And then when you move this arm up, it affects the way this shape looks. So these are little landmarks that you guys need to keep in mind. And another thing you guys need to keep in mind is how these bones, how the spine bends, how it affects the abs and everything like that. So the spinal erector and the abs are the main muscles that stabilize the pelvis and the torso. and enable their movement, right? So what I'm trying to show you is when you're looking at the tension that your spine will put on your, your upper body, right? Your upper rib cage and your pelvis, right? If they bend backwards, you're also stretching out your abdominals, right? So the abdominals are going to have an elongated look to them whenever the torso, right? Your rib cage, this solid mass right here, bends back. When it bends forward, it contracts and it squeezes those, right? You would get more crunch right here in the folds of the abdomen, right? So these are the kind of things that you guys need to be looking out for when it comes to dealing with how the pelvis will stay still, right? And the movable mass, right? The movable mass is this, your rib cage. You can bend it back, bend it forward. You can, you can rotate it a little bit because of your spine, but it's one of the movable masses on our body, right? So what you guys have to remember is when you're drawing your characters, you don't want to make them straight up and down, because what happens is our rib cage has a slight bend forward, and so does our pelvis, right? You can see that there's this natural S curve of our spine that happens, right? There's this natural S curve that this doesn't have, and when you do it straight like this, you're not taking into account the S curve of the spine. And it's very, very important because it kind of gives us the way we stand, our form. Like if you look at this guy right here, right, you can see that he's got that nice S curve spine that gives him the natural motion. And you can see right from the face, if you look straight down, you can see that the face right here almost aligns with the top of the foot, right? And that's why you have to kind of give yourself motion. Our bodies are always kind of in motion. They have a rhythm to it, right? As to how we flow. All right. So here's the thing about when you build your body, right? This is the cool thing about how our body works. Our bones, right? How people say I got big bones. You don't have big bones. You have big meat around it. That's really what the problem is. So when you're drawing that or sculpting that, you want to remember that our bones will always stay the same. We can put all the meat and muscle around it that we want, but for the most part, right, the thorax will still be the same, right? And you're just going to build muscle around it, right? And the muscle will act as kind of like a cushion around your skeletal structure, right? It's not like he grew his he didn't grow his rib cage, you know what I'm saying? So he did put on some muscle around it, and when you put on muscle around it, well, that's the result you get, right? Growing the traps, the delts, So these are the little things that you guys need to come. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to that natural S curve kind of shape that we have in the human body, and how the rib cage will bend, and then the pelvis will also give you that bend as well, to give you that nice kind of S shape that our figure normally has, right? When we talk about how males and females differentiate themselves from each other, right, we talk about how our rib cage differs, right? So for the male rib cage, right, when you look at how much subcutaneous fat that we have in our body, it's a lot less than women. All right. The reason is because, well, females need it for their menstrual cycles and for childbirth and different things like that, whereas we can live with a lower percentage of body fat in general. So that's another things that you guys have to take into account when discussing or when sculpting and drawing the male and female anatomy. All right, so now let's go and turn this around. Let's go to the back. All right, so when we're talking about the back of the anatomy, we're talking about the spine, the vertebral column that is right here, right? The scapula, right? Our shoulder blades, they're right about here. Our trapezius, the traps, right? Sometimes you can see the traps from the front. The latissimus dorsi, which is the broadest muscle in the body, right? The lats, right here. You can see how ginormous of it. It's like just a broad, just a big swat of muscle, right? So let's also, I'm trying to see what's important for you guys, because everything here isn't, you want to just kind of focus on the bigger picture of everything. Let me see. I mean, you already pretty much know everything else is, right? So if we focus on the traps, the lats, let's see. This is the external oblique right here. You can see it from the back. It wraps around as well. But other than that, let's see. We've got the teres major, which we talked about, the teres minor, which is this littler one right in here, right? This is the infraspinatus right over here, another kind of flat, broader muscle. So these muscles, they work in a similar fashion, right? They're in a grouping of each other, but what happens is the lats cover them up. So you'll get the traps that really show up and that can get really pronounced when you work out. You'll get the lats that'll get really pronounced. The deltoids will really get pronounced, but these guys will kind of be a little inset. They're a little covered up because these muscles are easier to build and they bulge out just whenever you work out a little bit more. All right. So here is the posterior. This is the iliac spine right here, right? And other than these major points, this is what you really focus on the back. So front, back, and then here is the scapula right under that, right? And then we've got our spinal column that goes all the way from the base of the neck all the way down to the pelvis, right? So it goes from the base of the neck all the way down to the pelvis, right? And then the pelvis, the iliac crest, right, for the pelvis. And these are the landmarks that you guys should be kind of thinking about whenever you're sculpting your models, right? How you see the spine bends and curves, right? How that muscle lays over it, right? Where those muscles are, the deltoids, right? The infers major, minor that are in here, and then you see how ginormous the lats are, right? How far they span from the back, right? They go from all the way up here, all the way right here, and then we've got these our little flingers or the blades right here that happen, and then our oblique, and then on the other side right here, what you can't see is our abs, right? So these are the things that you guys will start to know once you start sculpting it in, drawing it, right? When you start to know these things, it will help. So these are some proportions and relationships that I've been talking about that you guys should keep in mind, is how the rib cage connects to the pelvis, the flow of the muscles and how they wrap around the torso, the importance of the line of action in the spine, which is the S curve of the spine that I've been harping on about, right? So, with that being said, let's talk about some of the greater round muscles, the teres major, the little round muscle, the teres minor, right? And we've talked about these, and I told you they're all on the scapula, and they all help us with the movement of our arm, and they all kind of connect inside And the reason it's hard to see is because not only are they on the scapula, the lats kind of cover them up. The lats are so big, right, that you can only see the major and the infraspinatus muscle, this giant green one over here. So you can see how they work, how they connect. And then we talk about the broadest muscle on the back, which is the lats, the latissimus dorsi, and then how it connects to the interior. And all of this, right, it connects to our arm and how our arm helps us move. And when we move, you can feel everything that gets affected just because they're all connected to each other. The way we work is very, very interesting, right? This is just a cut section of all the parts of the body, just so you guys can see what it looks like from top down, right? How the silhouette value of that kind of works. So the scapula as a bony landmark. So if you see the bony landmarks of the scapula, the spine, the medial border of the scapula, and then the inferior angle, you also see the border of the back muscle. Whoops. Right? So if you follow that, right, you follow the spine, right? Follow that. Then the medial border, and then the angle, right? What you'll see is the most shapes visible on the surface of the backs are formed by muscles, yet all the muscles are attached to the bones. And all of these, they attach to the inside of it. It's crazy how our body works, right? Our muscles will start off on our back. They'll attach to the inside of our arm. They'll start at the top of the base of our skull, and then they'll attach to the back of our, so that's why injuries sometimes can take so long to heal, is because sometimes it might be like a sprain and the muscle is a little bit frayed, right? But if it's completely ripped off the bone, you're going to have to reattach it and then set it for a while so that that bone and that muscle can do their thing, fuse back together. That's why injuries for sports players and, different things are such a big deal, because, man, sometimes it might start off as an injury on this side of your foot. And then because it's affecting your gait, right, it then goes and affects the other side of your foot or the other side of your shoulder, or because you're now having to overcompensate for a pain that you're having here. So our bodies are very surprisingly delicate, right, for our construction, right? You would almost think you would want the hard part on the outside, right? You would almost think like we should have been designed with an exoskeleton since we're so soft and squishy, like we are very, meat bag and, juices, we make a good snack for whatever alien race wants to devour us, because, it's like we're crunchy in the center, so it's a very interesting design. I always think so. Like whenever you look at the anatomy of how, just even this, how fragile. Like think about how, like I think what is it like a pound or 2 pounds of force, and you can break somebody's clavicle. Like it's crazy how delicate some of these pieces are and how important they are to us, because you have to think about the pec really attaches all right here, right, until it gets to like your shoulder blade area.
What
What was that? Were you saying something? Okay, never mind then. Yeah, so it's very interesting how all of this connects, right, to the sternum. So the medial end of the clavicle is also called its sternal end because it connects to the sternum. All right. There, it creates the sternoclavicle joint, the only connection between the upper limb and the skeleton's trunk. So right here, it does connect to the sternum, but it's just, these parts are so delicate. And the only place where the arm connects to the rest of the body are at the sternoclavicle joints right here, right? So like, it's very interesting how all of these little pieces fit together, right? There's like tendons
I
inside
can
of
read
there.
like back to three with that image, and then you move it like forward.
Okay, what was that? I'm gonna mute you for a
Like
second. Do you have
that.
a question, Cam? Okay, mute you for a second. Okay, so let's talk about the horizontal abduction and the adduction of the shoulder and the form changes of the pectoralis major muscle. So when we're talking about horizontal abduction and adduction of the shoulder and form changes of the pectoralis major, we're talking about what happens when you twist your arms this way, right? Or you turn them up that way, right? You can see how if you turn the pectoralis, right, elongates outward and pulls towards, right, towards whatever, because you got to remember it's connecting all the way inside that delt. And when I turn it, I'm pulling that. But when I turn it up, it's then going to pull my pecs all the way up almost to the bottom of my ears, right? So these are little things that you guys have to keep in mind whenever you're sculpting is, all right, so my arm is doing what? My shoulder is doing what? What angle am I turning it in, right? Is he what position is he in? What is he holding, right? When you do these things, the pectoral muscle does something different as well, and you can see that, right? You can see how it like elongates itself, right? And you can see the pull of that pectoralis muscle as it goes right into that delt, and you can see how it broadens back out, right? And here's another way to look at it, right? And you can see how these wings or these fins kind of come back up whenever you've got your arm up, and then whenever you got it down, it kind of rests back into it, and then you get more of the oblique showing. All right. So now let's talk about the belly and the abs, right? When we talk about this, it's very important for you guys to remember that for male and females, even our abs shapes can be different. You can see that for females, they have kind of this apple shape, right? And for men, it doesn't exist because we have more space for abs, right? So there's flat abs, and it's way more visible on men than it is women, right? And there's exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, this is how it is, right? And when we talk about the six pack, I was saying earlier, right? It's really more of a 10 pack. It's really more of a 10 pack. And based on genetics, a person can have 4 to 10 pack abs, right? The lower belly fat usually hides the bottom two, right? So that's usually the case for most people. Right now, I'm rocking myself a 1 pack. You know, it's a dad pack right now. So it's very very interesting to see how people get super vascular, super very low body fat. You can see every single ab that they have, and it's like, dude, you have like 10 pack, right? But some people, it gets hidden under a lot of fluff, but everybody has it. You haven't seen it in a while because you ain't done the right amount of crunches yet. So that's how our abs work. So when you think about the abs, I want you to think about them in 3 different sections, right? There's the linea alba, which is like that center space, right, that you have in there. Then you have the linea semilunaris, which is the outer side, right, which is the edge, right, where the oblique kind of tapers off into it, right? These are your obliques right here, right? These broader muscles, and then you have your abs, your rectus abdominis muscles, which is the abs, and they're not these kind of squarish, cubey kind of shapes, right? They kind of follow this kind of down swoop of different, more interesting shapes because of how the muscle kind of grows and the fiber kind of spreads out and rounds itself onto your body and then onto whatever you've got underneath. So that's what I want you guys to kind of keep in mind. So the biggest things that I want you guys to kind of avoid is oversimplifying muscles, which you just talked about again, which is like some of the abs. You don't want them to be like these little perfect cubes, right? That's not what they look like, right? And if you overemphasize muscles, you can lead to a bodybuilder look. If that's what you want, fine. If that's not what you want, you know, then you want to kind of tone it down. You don't want to ignore underlying bone structure, the rib cage, the pelvis. You want to keep in mind where those are because those will let you know where the muscles are, right? Misplacing the scapula and the clavicle, it's super important to put them in the right place, to have where their connection to the sternum is, how they connect to the shoulder blade, and how they ultimately affect the way our arm and hands and everything else moves around it, right? So forgetting the natural asymmetry of the body is very important for you guys, which I talk about that S curve. That's the way we just naturally flow. We have this rhythm to our bodies that it's not just up and straight and left, and you're not nobody stands at attention 24/7 like that. And if you draw like that, your drawings look very stiff, statuesque, and not alive, or like they have any character or personality to them, right? Neglecting the flow of the rhythm of the muscles, and which is what I've been trying to tell you guys, is like these muscles, they have a flow, they have a rhythm to them, right? The delts will start somewhere, they'll end, right? Then you'll pick up somewhere else, and the bicep will go right under the delt, or the pec will go right just these little flows and rhythm. Once you start understanding how they work and how to build them on top of each other, your sculpts are going to look a lot better. Your drawings are going to look a lot better. You're going to get much better results and outcomes every time you step up to ZBrush to try to put something down, because you understand the basic principles of where things are kind of located, right? And you don't have to be a master, right? It takes years and years to master this stuff. But if you keep these things in mind, if you keep reference around yourself all the time, you're always constantly kind of critiquing your eye and measuring a little bit, saying, hey, all right, this is connected here. All right, the belly button falls on this landmark, the shoulder blade falls on this landmark, the nose, eyes, these fall on this landmark. Well, you're going to get closer to a better result than if you didn't have all of those resources, right? And stop thinking that you know all of this stuff already. Stop thinking you have it in your head and I can just wing it. I can just do it. You can't. You don't. I've been doing this for a long time, and I still go back to reference, because sometimes I'll go, okay, well, does this connect to this, or okay, this is why this looks wrong, and I'll bring up reference, right? Even at my job, or like even at work, like if I don't have reference, like I might have seen One Piece 1,000 times, but if I don't look at the reference for a One Piece character or a One Piece set, I'm gonna mess it up because my memory is only so good, So those are the kind of things. And when I'm talking about like how asymmetry and that S curve can make for a much more interesting character, you can see how this is a perfectly good statue. It just looks very boring, right? It just looks very, very lifeless. But once you add that natural S curve of the spine, you can see the tilt, right, of the different angles. The head is kind of tilted a certain way, the face, the planes, how everything flows. There's a rhythm to it. It just gives you more interest. You're drawn to what's going on. And I think this is David, if I'm correct, but I can't remember. I don't know. I can't remember my art history probably as well as you guys can. You guys might have taken a course recently, but this might be David. I think this is like the rock he's gonna throw. just based on the hands, I think it's David, right? Whenever there was back in the day, apparently they used to sculpt David's hands like really, really big. So that's why I think it's David. But other than that, the rhythm of it, you can see like how there's action lines, there's leading lines leading to different places, and it's not just I did the work and it is, and the thing is, for the time, this perfectly fine. But now that we know, okay, we're classically trained, we can see what looks and feels better. We can, start to assess. This would be good if I was making a game and I wanted my character to be like have a T pose, right? This is how I would sculpt it. But if I'm trying to show something, if I'm trying to present something, if I'm trying to convey a message, convey an emotion, right? I'm going for this every time. All right. So that is it for this class. Your assignment for today is to attempt the torso, right? I will send you guys a copy of this PowerPoint. I will post the video online. And then next class, I will sculpt the torso. And also remember, don't forget to post the concept art your research of the bust that you want to do for the midterm. All right, and we'll start that. All right, does anybody have any questions for me before we move on?